morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where for the first half of today's episode, we're going to focus on people in Hollywood who are making smart moves. But then for the second half of the episode, we're going to focus on people who are not. So who's at the top of the class today? Well, one such student is Fox, who seems, for once, to be doing a very good job with their Marvel properties, as we just recently discussed, namely Deadpool and the upcoming X-Men Apocalypse. And maybe even, despite the horrible news that has surfaced about Josh Trank, Fantastic Four. Well, the Fox Marvel property we're going to talk about today is the Deadpool film, which is currently filming. And it's been doing so for a few weeks now, to the point where a lot of coverage of that filming has been available online. For instance, lots of photos, but even filming of the filming. And one BTT viewer pointed me towards a YouTube channel, and I'll put a link below in the video description so you can check it out as well, where all they've done recently is upload footage of Deadpool filming on location. So I was like, I like Deadpool. I'm enjoying all of the leaks. The film looks fantastic. I'll check it out. And also, Fringe Nerd was, very insistent in a very positive and polite way, posting this link on a number of my videos in the comment section. So I felt anything, that got Fringe Nerd that excited was worth, at least like a few moments of my time to check out. And I'm glad that I did. And thank you, Fringe Nerd, for delivering the first story of today's morning movie news. So what is it? Well, lo and behold, the very first video that was available to view on this YouTube channel, just by chance when I clicked on it, was titled Deadpool and Colossus. And I was like, I don't recall Colossus being cast. That would have been a major story. How is Colossus on set filming with Deadpool? And sure enough, it was Deadpool interacting with a CGI motion capture stand-in. Not someone acting to the degree of an Andy Serkis, or hopefully Lupita Nyong'o, mind you, but like one of the stand-ins who wears that gray suit with the little circles and squares on it, and you see them standing in for, generic alien or generic ape, and when you see on-set photos all the time. So that's what they had here. And it was a really large individual. So I think that was very interesting. And I did some research, and I discovered that sure enough, that is the stand-in for Colossus. And while he himself is quite big, I guess to help provide a good line of sight for Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool, the CGI Colossus is going to be even bigger. But let's rewind just a few seconds there. Yes, that's right. CGI Colossus. And that's what I think is the most exciting thing to come out of this whole little story. A big story, and that's that they're going to go for a fully CGI realized character, at least when he's metaled up. Now, some might say, well, wasn't Daniel Cudmore a CGI character as well? He didn't actually put metal on and walk around. Well, I think that was minimal CGIing with him, and you saw the character do very little. Daniel Cudmore would run in, punch something, or often just metal up, and then carry someone to safety. You're like, you didn't need to metal up for that. I think then he acted as a human shield. You, of course, remember the scenes in X2 when they had to leave the mansion, and that's like one of the few things that Colossus ever got to do. I believe he also was involved, in the Danger Room sequence at the beginning of X-Men The Last Stand, but Daniel Cudmore, not only, I think, to be fair, isn't the greatest of Colossuses, but also, on the flip side, never got a really good shot at the role. And he's not going to, because he's not in this movie. But to do a really CGI character, or they could have just gotten some silver paint and hired Dwayne Johnson, which I think could have been very interesting. I love Dwayne Johnson, and he is ginormous. I'm probably making Colossus. They'll be like, why don't we make him the size of Dwayne Johnson? And they'll be like, I don't know, that's not healthy or realistic. And everyone will be like, but we love Dwayne Johnson. And of course, we kid because we care. And as I've said a few times now, I hope someone's looking out for the guy and making sure he isn't making any bad health decisions for his career. Don't forget the long-term game as well as the short-term game. But anyway, this Colossus is going to be completely computer animated. We'll see if they'll shoot some indoor scenes. Usually the way a movie works is they shoot the exteriors first, and then they shoot the interiors. So obviously Colossus would rarely be, metaled up and not metaled up outside, so that's why they haven't had to cast that role yet. But taking so long to cast it leads me to believe that that what's probably going to happen is that it's going to be like a Groot or a Rocket Raccoon type role where it's almost always CGI, which would be interesting. Although I think that Piotr Rasputin's yin-yang qualities of being this metal giant who's extremely powerful and can be very brutal in a fight, with also an artist. He's a painter when he's not with the X-Men has always been a very interesting part of the character. So, although I don't think Deadpool is in need of a painter, although you could get some good jokes out of that, right? Some good downtime interaction between Colossus and Deadpool. But anyway, I'm curious, what do you think of the CGI route? Do you agree with me that because they haven't cast the role yet, and they've cast all the other roles in the film, that it's very likely that perhaps Colossus will never metal down. So, but I think that a lot of people have always wanted to see Colossus in all his glory, and I think that at least that looks like what you'll be getting here. So, or maybe they'll just have a fight sequence. Colossus, of course, isn't a bad guy, so maybe he'll just be making a cameo in the film, and therefore he won't need to metal down, perhaps. And that would be the beginnings of perhaps some crossovers with these movies. We all know that Fox is interested in building their own Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've heard a lot about the X-Men and Fantastic Four potentially crossing over, but what about Deadpool, right? This would be a good way to sow those seeds. So that's the first story of the day, and so let me know if you agree that that's a smart move by Hollywood. So the other smart move by Hollywood is that New Line and Cary Fukunaga have cast Will Poulter I wrote Poltergeist for some reason, I guess because Poulter. I have Poltergeist on the brain. I'm very excited for that film to come out. But Will Poulter has not been cast in that. He's been cast in Stephen King's It, which of course is a very hallowed property, not only because the novelist is of course a Stephen King favorite among fans, but also because it was made into a really now classic miniseries for television in 1991, starring Tim Curry as It, the clown, and then also John Ritter is one of the, we'll get into the timeline of Stephen King's It in just a moment, but one of the adults terrorized by the sadistic clown. So this is a very interesting story, and I think that this is a great example of taking a property and making it more commercial. We all the time talk about, what makes a film more commercial. Are the moves that are made to make a property more commercial good or detrimental to the film as art, etc., etc. And I think this is a great example of a film that's been made more commercial, but has actually strengthened the film as well. So Cary Fukunaga is, in a really good place in his career right now. He hasn't made it to the top of the mountain, but he's got a good grip on the side of the mountain because, of course, he won the Emmy for directing True Detective. Beasts of No Nation with Idris Elba was a big purchase for Netflix, which was made a great headline, but might have set him back just a tad or slowed down his ascent to the top of the mountain because people are wondering if a Netflix deal will do well. With movies. They've proven themselves with TV, but movies are a whole nother situation. And it's not going so well with Ridiculous Six, as we've also discussed recently. But anyway, Cary Fukunaga is doing one of his dream projects, and that's to write and direct an adaptation of Stephen King's It. And it's like a 900-page novel, apparently. And so Cary Fukunaga has decided to make this into 2 movies. Now, this clown terrorizes these kids from being children to all the place when they grow up. So the first movie will focus on them as children and being terrorized, and then the second film will skip forward a bunch of years to them as adults when the clown, still played by Will Poulter, he'll play the role in both movies, returns. So people love, episodic storytelling these days in movies, despite what Joss Whedon says, and we'll be talking about him shortly. So I think this is great to get a horror film in on that kind of movie making. I think fans would really spark to that, so that's one way to be very commercial, having a 2-parter. But then also, the casting of Will Poulter is extremely commercial. How so? Well, when they originally were thinking of casting the role of It for Cary Fukunaga's adaptation, they were going to go with an older actor. And one of the people they were considering, for instance, was Ben Mendelsohn, who, of course, is not officially confirmed, but is circling Rogue One for Star Wars. So he's an actor, he was in The Dark Knight Rises, he made his big breakthrough in Animal Kingdom, and he showed up in a lot of indie films. He was in Exodus, for instance, as, that slimy outpost overseer of the slaves that, betrays Christian Bale's Moses. So he's a very good actor, but he's certainly not a commercial draw. But, just the perfect actor for an old-school Cary Fukunaga movie. But they decided at New Line, they said, we really would like you, Cary, to go younger. We think it's a more commercially viable way to go, and I think we think it'll inject some energy into the franchise. And at first, Cary Fukunaga was really against this, but they said, you know what? We love Will Poulter here at New Line. He was in We're the Millers for us. We have a relationship with this actor. Can we bring him in to audition for you, and then you can make up your mind? Well, they must have seen him audition first, because apparently he was so good in this audition, so they must have known what they had. But he blew Cary Fukunaga away. He was like, you are it! And I think that when you just look at Will Poulter, of course, if you're not familiar with him, he's in We're the Millers. He was also in The Maze Runner. He has a really great face for this. I think he could look really good as the scary clown. And I think he does have some Tim Curry-esque qualities to him. So Cary Fukunaga's like, great, I'm going to go with you. I mean, they're still in negotiations, they're still working out the contract, but it was such a big announcement that it must be almost close to a done deal. So now why is this commercial? Well, Will Poulter is a younger actor, so he'll bring in a younger demographic, and he's a very popular actor with that demographic, as evidenced by how many of you picked up on this story. I got an abnormal number of tweets about this casting than I usually would for a horror film, than I usually do for horror films, especially when they don't feature like a name talent like Sam Raimi in the genre, correct? You know what I'm saying? Like Cary Fukunaga is not someone that a lot of people are paying attention to, but they are paying attention to Will Poulter. So if you have Will Poulter, a very commercial commodity, mixed with the guy from True Detective, which is of course how New Line's going to sell this, I think you start to have a real commercial hit on your hands. Also, because Will Poulter is so popular, I think that this bodes very well for merchandising for the movie. People perhaps wanting to dress up as the character for Halloween. Suddenly he's a little more relatable. So I think this is fantastic. I think it's very, very smart. And not only is it very smart for the movie, but it's just a beautiful, it's when Hollywood is at its best. The property becomes more commercial. Cary Fukunaga's career gets raised up a few notches. Will Poulter's career gets raised up a few notches. Because while he brings commercialism to the film, by working with Cary Fukunaga in a lead role like this, which is very much a character role, he gets more credibility on the artistic side. So it just balances out beautifully. It's a thing of beauty. And kudos, this is when studios do what they're supposed to. They nudge a filmmaker in the right direction. So often here when we're like, hey, is someone asleep at the wheel at the studio? This is why, because studios, you know, there's the stigma that when a studio gets involved, they're going to ruin everything, which is why I think so many people love that Warner Brothers has said, oh, hey, everybody at DC, do whatever you want, it's fine. But the point is when things are working as they should, a creator is supposed to push things forward, push the edge of the envelope, and the studio is supposed to push things forward in terms of commercial viability. So everything is firing on all cylinders with Stephen King's It, this remake, and it's turning into an even more exciting project than initially imagined. All right, so those are the top honors for the day. Let's go over to the dunce part of the classroom. And first up is Joss Whedon, who made some major headlines late in the day yesterday when he quit Twitter. Now, initially, everybody was like, hey, he must have quit Twitter because he can't take the heat, so he got out of the kitchen. Of course, he had a backfire when he called the Mary Sue to task for not, in itself, calling out the sexism that he felt was in that Jurassic World clip. That brought him a lot of hate. And then also some people guessed that because of some dissatisfaction with the way Black Widow is depicted in Avengers Age of Ultron, with which she's saddled with that romantic subplot with Hulk. I was excited for Brutasha too, but as I said in my review, it didn't quite turn out, I think, as we'd hoped. And I think some people were upset about that and apparently let their opinion be known on Twitter. So that was the first guess, that he quit Twitter because he just couldn't take it anymore. But I don't think that's what it is. Some people also pointed out that Joss Whedon has not been a big fan of Twitter. And he said on numerous occasions, you know what, I don't like it. It's not that, and not that he doesn't like interacting with his fans, but that he doesn't like the obligation of having to come up with tweets, try to be clever, have reveals, etc. He just feels it's too much of an imposition on his time, which could be better spent, according to Joss Whedon. So my feeling is, and this is a really bold move, that the weekend after Avengers Age of Ultron comes out, because he's leaving Marvel, he's done, and he's made that very clear. He's burning the bridge behind him, and he just put another match down yesterday when he quit Twitter. Because it's my opinion that he was contractually obligated to be on Twitter because of his involvement with the MCU, which is very social media friendly, as it should be, as should any brand these days. So he had to be on Twitter for his Marvel association, but as soon as that left, he dropped the account, which I find just shocking. And I don't know what the heck's going on in Joss Whedon's mind, and I don't know why nobody is influencing him and talking him down from this, self-destructive path that he's on, because he's just apparently so unhappy with Marvel that he's willing to hurt himself in the process of dissing them. So why is it bad for him to leave Twitter? Well, the guy has over 1 million followers, which he could be educating about his upcoming projects that maybe do get him excited again. The dream projects he had to put on hold so he could go and make a lot of money for Marvel and up his credibility in the industry so that he could make said dream projects. Marvel is so evil, Joss. It's just so crazy. I think Marvel, I believe that, the movies aren't getting darker, but the behind-the-scenes situation at Marvel does seem to be approaching darker days. So I think that he should have stayed on Twitter, just tweeted less, that's fine, and, used it as the tool that it's supposed to be for one's career. And I just think it's such an F you to Marvel, like, you forced me to be on Twitter. I hate it so much that as soon as I no longer had anything to have to do with you, I quit. And also, he quit this soon? I mean, you would think he'd wind down his relationship with Marvel, but no! After the opening weekend for his final film with them, not even until the end of the run, you'd think he'd unceremoniously quit, like after the movie had crossed the $1 billion club, being like, my work here is done. But no, he quits after the thing underperformed and didn't manage to even top the first film, which we're going to talk about today, by the way, in just a moment for the viewer question. But it's just, I think it's a really dumb move, and I'm curious to what you guys think, and if you agree with me that he made not such a smart move when he decided to quit Twitter yesterday. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now we're finishing up our dumb move section of the episode, and that goes into the viewer question. And Nisha Foster had a very interesting question about box office from yesterday's Movie Math. So Nisha says, or Nija, Nisha even put pronunciation here, but I still even am having a problem with the phonetic way that the name was put out. I think it's N-I-J, so I'm going to say Nija. So my name is Nija, and I have been a BTT viewer for about 2.5 years, and I am a huge fan. That means so much. Thank you. Thank you for being a BTT viewer for so long, and I'm glad you continue to enjoy the show, and I hope you are enjoying the way it continues to hopefully evolve. So Nija says, after faithfully watching morning movie news for almost 3 years, I have a question. Okay, let's see. I love it, so I picked it for today. So the question is, given that the Mayweather-Pacheco fight was one of the most anticipated sporting events in sports history, generating an almost $400 million in pay-per-view sales, why was the industry surprised that Age of Ultron didn't perform as high as the first Avengers movie? The average cost to watch the fight was between $80 and $100, which means most people were not willing to spend an extra $12 to $30 to see a movie the same weekend. Was the fight included in the initial box office projection? Furthermore, how does the industry make its projections, and what factors are included in this? Thank you so much. You are awesome. Smiley face, heart. Well, Nija, that is an excellent question, and I think it shows a little bit of the hubris of Hollywood. Or hubris if you want to be silly about it, but the hubris of Hollywood that for so long they just could not imagine anything being able to compete with them in the most hallowed of movie times, the summer movie season. Especially the first weekend in May, which has been, for decades, the big day to go to the movies. That and Christmas Day. Like, those are the big days. Those are the most important release dates and the most coveted. Now, of course, the release schedule is expanding. Movies are being released all throughout the year these days and making a pretty penny doing so. But still, those are still the old school prestige dates because they've systematically been big performances. Also, Thanksgiving is also big because it kicks off the holiday season. So, so that's one thing. I think that Hollywood felt this is our day. No, this is what people do on the first weekend of May. They go to the movies. Now, the other thing is that Marvel has had this date for Avengers Age of Ultron for quite some time, whereas this Mayweather-Pacheco fight was certainly much more of a recent entry to what you could do the first weekend of May in 2015. So they're not going to leave that date. They had it all to themselves. Nobody would challenge them. They had the rollout plan from overseas. So when Mayweather-Pacheco came against it, I think that it was a last-minute thing, or a last-minute in terms of Hollywood release schedule planning. And also, I think, honestly, again, the hubris angle. They just honestly didn't believe this could affect Avengers. So I think this is something that Hollywood's going to have to grapple with. Also, Marvel. People felt no one can challenge Marvel. Marvel cannot be beaten. Marvel is the most amazing property of all time. Seeing a Marvel movie is the most important thing someone can do with their afternoon or evening. So I think that's also a big part of it. So what happens is that Marvel feels no one can beat us, and Hollywood feels no one can beat us. And then they both get punched in the face by Mayweather and Pacheco. So that's what happened, I think, with this weekend. Also, as I said in movie math, a lot of other factors: dissatisfaction with the movie, bad word of mouth, bad reviews, and also something else that's starting to build as a story is perhaps too much of an interconnected MCU. So I'm very curious to how you guys feel about that. Would you agree that the MCU's interconnectedness is becoming actually perhaps a liability, where people, like one of you said, you had to make a PowerPoint presentation for your friend to go and see Avengers: Age of Ultron? Is it perhaps getting to a point where it's too hard to watch a movie unless you're a diehard Marvel fan? I think that could be potentially a problem, especially because when they cut down the movie, it was a lot of broad strokes for Avengers: Age of Ultron. So as a Marvel fan, I loved it, but it's almost like people when they used to watch Harry Potter movies. I don't know if you feel the same way. When I used to watch Harry Potter, I'd be like, I enjoy this overall, but I really have no idea what's happening because it's such broad strokes and I didn't read the books. And people who read the books were like, oh yeah, I totally get it. And so I think that finally I understand the Harry Potter experience for those who had read the novels. And I think the same thing's starting to happen with the Marvel movies. Now, of course, it worked very well for Harry Potter, but Harry Potter was finite. It only was going to run a certain number of movies. We'll see. And also, now they're entering into original story territory, where these things have to be fleshed out and can't be delivered in broad strokes, because Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was a textbook, not a story novelization. So I think that Marvel better watch out for that, because they are supposed to go on for an infinite number of movies, and as they get further and further down the road, they might become harder and harder for people to join them mid-journey. So that's a whole bunch of problems for the movie. Now, as for how is a box office projected? Well, first of all, you take into account the other films in the franchise. So you look at what the first Avengers did. Then every movie, especially, every franchise is supposed to increase its viewership. That's the whole point of continuing to make the movie. And as we've discussed before, that's because the movie plays on ancillary markets, it plays on TV, and especially with Marvel, like Guardians of the Galaxy and Winter Soldier bring in new fans. So what's supposed to happen is that your audience grows, and it's reflected in opening weekend box office numbers. People who waited 3 weeks to see the first Avengers are now fans, and they rush out opening weekend. So that's why you're always supposed to see an increase. When you don't see an increase, it's problematic. As you might recall, Mockingjay Part 1 was a little bit of a red flag for Lionsgate, because it did not increase its opening weekend off of Catching Fire, which was a concern for the franchise. But again, well, they're trying to make Hunger Games something that is infinite, but right now it is finite. It's a little bit more in the Harry Potter territory. So that's what's supposed to happen. And a great example of where that is working is John Wick. You might have seen that yesterday they officially said, for sure, 100% definite, we're making John Wick 2. And everyone got very excited and actually trended on Twitter for a little while. And that's amazing for a film that did not do particularly well at the box office. So that's a film that has done what it's supposed to. It has grown its audience, on DVD and streaming and the ancillary markets. And so when John Wick 2 comes out, you better believe the box office should be bigger. So I think so that's what they not only do they look at the other movies and the natural growth for a franchise, but they look at how other films have performed in the past in that release date, with that talent. It's very scientific. And they also poll people. They say, hey, what are you looking forward to seeing this weekend? And they ask you, are you definitely going, they do it in categories. Are you definitely going to see Avengers: Age of Ultron? You might see Avengers: Age of Ultron. You're on the fence about seeing Avengers: Age of Ultron. And they do it by demographic, not only in terms of gender and ethnicity, but age. So they know what targets they have to hit with their advertising. They're like, well, men 30 to 55 are convinced. They're definitely going. But women, let's say 18 to 24 aren't sure. So we have to really focus our advertising there, perhaps. So that's the way Hollywood works. And they really, there's a science to it. There really is. So that's why projections are usually right. Someone said, oh, projections actually, you haven't been right lately. They have been right largely. I mean, the projections from the box office are pretty much generally spot on. That's why it's such a big deal when a movie doesn't deliver. And especially because they adjust these predictions as the weekend begins and progresses. So the fact that the Avengers: Age of Ultron prediction didn't change Saturday morning meant that as far as Marvel and Disney were concerned and the rest of the industry, this thing was still on track to do as projected, with 215 million making it the biggest opening of all time. And that's, it might be a mix of bad science and also, again, hubris, and just simply not believing that this boxing match could take down the biggest ship in the Hollywood fleet right now, the MCU. So I'm curious, what do you think? Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question from Naja. Anything you'd like us to cover tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.